between operators and validators and how that looks like?
Yeah, sure. So it's very straightforward. Operators give service to the network the same as validators or miners do on regular blockchains, and they do so by running a piece of software. And on the other or the opposite, you have the users themselves, which select operators from the network, from the verified list of operators, and give them a share of their validator, and in that way, those operators can work together in order to operate the validator. And each operator, for doing that job, can set its own fee. That fee is denominated in SSV. And the sum of all of the operators' fees are what the user basically pays. So imagine that you have 4 operators, each one of them have a fee of 10 SSVs, let's say, per month. So your total monthly cost for running a validator on the SSV node, the SSV network, will be 40 SSVs. And those fees are dynamic, and the operators can change them. And of course, it's a very free open market system. So, the costly you are, of course, less people will choose you, but maybe you're very high quality operators. So maybe you're worth the money. You have different configurations you can do. You can maybe take top tier operators, which cost more, and then some medium tier operators, which cost less, to offset your costs. It's very much the way you set up a cloud service. You can choose. You can choose your own dedicated server, which nobody touches, and then it's very costly, or you can choose spot instances, which are less expensive, and so on and so forth. And so here, it's the same thing with the SSV network. You can choose the operators which make sense for your setup. And so all of the fees are paid with a token. And of course, the more validators you have on the network, the more fees they pay. And of course, the more tokens they need in order to pay those fees. And of course, the other factor is the higher the rewards are for Ethereum staking, the higher the fees are as well. I would imagine that the network will get to some equilibrium point where operators charge some average cost. Today we see around 10% of the rewards, but that might change. And the users are simply paying with the SSV. And of course, on top of that, you have the whole governance part of SSV.
Mm-hmm. Great answer. So the follow-up question to that was a very detailed answer, by the way. The follow-up question to that is there, or can you specifically say if this is more beneficial for operators or for validators? Strictly economically speaking.
I mean, it's a simple transaction. I mean, validators or users need the best infrastructure they can get, and the operators, of course, want to be the best operators they can be in order to be selected by more users. So I don't think it's a matter of who gets more. It's simply a matter of it's something everybody needs, right? I mean, as long as Ethereum staking is growing and people want to stake, you'll have to run your infrastructure somewhere. And so you have a couple of, you have several different options. You can do it all yourself. You can do something hybrid like block staking today, where part of the system runs on your cloud, part of it runs on ours. You can go full custodial, full managed. You can do tokenized staking and so on. But the common truth between all of those different solutions is somebody somewhere needs to run 32 ETH validators. It doesn't really matter if it's a pool or it's a staking service or it's a DIY staking solution. And so as long as you have demand for running 32 ETH validators, and I believe that demand will be very, very big and will grow with time, then it's a simple question of, where should you, which infrastructure you should use. And I think that the more SSV becomes mature and so on, the more often the answer is SSV.
Mm-hmm. I have a very interesting question from a user asking to describe how it looks like as an example. Let's say I'm a Stakewise user. Let's say Stakewise is one of the operators. Let's say I'm used to receiving rewards let's call it the Stakewise way. How would my reward system, or how would my rewards in total look like under the SSV versus how they looked like before? Yeah. Not specifically for, Stakewise, but anyone.
I think that it's important to look at SSV's infrastructure. And now the question is, who is using that infrastructure? If a staking pool like SSV or Lido or anyone basically uses SSV, then you as the stake pool's user, of course, only care what the service is coming from the staking pool. So in terms of the quality of the service and of course how much they charge for their own service. Those staking pools could use SSV under the hood. And so the same way as they pay today for infrastructure, might it be for their own setup, might it be for some cloud provider or Infura or whatever infrastructure they use, they will simply shift those costs to SSV. And so the retail quote unquote user won't really feel any different, except that he knows that this infrastructure which his service is using is much more distributed, much more robust. I think that's the beauty of infrastructure. And again, it's kind of goes back to the same notion of, everyone needs to run 32 ETH validators. We want to be in that spot. We want to be the infrastructure on which people build. And so the end user might not even, interact directly with the SSV network. It might be through some service. It might be through, any other medium. And I think that's very, very, very powerful. You want people to build on top of you, right? It's the same way as, if somebody comes to Coinbase and buys Ether or Bitcoin, they don't necessarily interact with Ether or Bitcoin, but they interacted via proxy via Coinbase. And so I think we'll see the same thing here. And of course, we'll always have those users who want to be, bare metal, bare bone setups where they can actually directly go to the SSV network and choose their own operators and so on and so forth. So I really think it's depends on the level of how much you want to invest in your setup or how much you want to be hands-on, hands-off kind of staker.
Mm-hmm. Great answer. I have plenty more questions, but before I continue, is there other questions around you guys want to ask? Okay, I'll ask the next question as well. So we have another question coming in, and this is actually something that came in from Reddit. It might be too early to answer, but from a business strategic point of view, what or who are the primary target customers for you guys? Retail users versus staking providers?
So I think it changes with time. So we are now, or at least the past few months, we're really focused on strategic partners and operators coming into the network, because that's kind of, the basic building blocks of SSV. And I think now we're transitioning more and more towards services. So who can, who will use it, who will choose those operators and so on. And I think it needs to be a combination of the two. You want to have, on the one hand, you want to have a very strong foundation of operators, and which are, very dedicated and very professional at what they do. And on the other hand, you want to have, inflow of Ether into the network to stake. And so I think that will be a combination of the two. I would, again, guess that a lot of our time will be spent on bringing those, intersections of services that Ether flows through them. So, from wallets all the way to DeFi services and so on. You want to get there because, if you connect to one of those services, they're already operating, already doing things, which will be much easier to create that kind of constant inflow of Ether into the ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. Great.
I think just to add to that point, and it kind of goes back to Alon's example with Coinbase. So you could take Chainlink, for example, which is a great company that provides services to other decentralized applications in the Ethereum ecosystem. And there you might go to, a service like Aave or Synthetics, and in the back end, the prices and, other features are essentially generated by the Chainlink decentralized oracles. So similar to that model, SSV might be, the engine behind a lot of staking solutions and services and, future dApps that will be built in the future on the Ethereum ecosystem, wherever staking is related. And I think there is a slight difference in the way that users can actually take 32 ETH and stake directly with the SSV network, but it's definitely our intention to sort of put more emphasis on the first use case in which other companies come and build on top of our ecosystem and generate decentralized applications and new ideas around staking.
Great answer. Alon, there's a question coming in asking us, again, you don't have to disclose all the details, but they're asking, who are the staking providers that have already committed themselves to using SSV? And if you could give a use case or example as for one of them, one of your choice, please do.
So we have a bunch of them, and it's pretty easy to see who. I mean, you can go on the app and see the verified list, and mostly we try to bring them there. So I think we have around 15 or maybe even more by now. Operators which are verified and are mostly companies, professional staking companies. And so you have big companies like Everstake and All Nodes, all the way to Lighthouse, for example, the Sigma Prime guys who develop Lighthouse, who run a node as well, and even the Beacon Chain guys, the Explorer guys, which run a node. So it's a wide array, and will increase more and more operators, and we'll get them into the network. I think that kind of, if we need to kind of estimate how many operators we want for mainnet, I think that anywhere between 20 and 30 is pretty amazing for mainnet. And of course that number will grow and grow. And so, I think every single one of them have a unique story. We have our sessions, Know Your Operator, and part of the reason why we did that was really to kind of give front stage to those operators and kind of tell their story and why they came to the SSV network, and why should people choose them as operators and so on. And so I think it's again, and also we'll get to that with kind of the big announcements here. But the more the more we work on the testnet, the more we want to make it look and feel like the actual mainnet. So the way we select verified operator is going to be changed a bit to be DAO centric and so on and so forth. And so I think that the more we move forward, the more it will be interesting to see kind of the dynamics between operators, who gets in to be verified and so on.
Great answer. I want to move on to the next section. But before we move
on, just in the spirit of making it like an open conversation, I was wondering if the guys on the call have any thoughts, ideas about the general rollout of our tokenomics, and I don't know, any comments.
Yeah, so I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So a question is, there's a very few amount of validators to start with. My question is there any thought into what an attack could look like? Because there's a very few limited of validators. You could see how people could deliberately enroll many nodes and just attack the system, right? Is that something that's been thought about?
You mean the operators, right? Not the validators.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. So so you basically, that's part of, or mostly the reason why we did the verified list of operators, and as we move forward, it will be controlled by the DAO. And so the idea there is that although anyone can run an operator node, not anyone can become a verified operator. And in order to become a verified operator, you'll have to present yourself, propose to the DAO, this kind of the same listing route that you'll see on Lido, for example, or Aave, or so on and so forth. So it's a kind of a very transparent and open and public process. And only those verified operators are, will be shown on the app and so on and so forth. And so you can create as many operator or as many nodes as you want, but at the end of the day, you need to be verified. Now, it doesn't stop somebody to select you, again, because it's an open network. But it's, I think people will choose verified operators rather than non-verified operators for exactly that same reason.
Sure, thank you.
Any other questions?
Can you talk a little bit more about the specific benefits that an operator or validator would have running SSV? So, I mean, the obvious ones are like reducing the slashing risk and things like that. But from an economic standpoint, like why should a validator choose to use SSV over another service in terms of trying to maximize their revenue?
I think that it depends on the time scale you're talking about. So the immediate time scale or the immediate time frame, not a lot of difference. I think that any good staking service has pretty good performance in terms of the effectiveness and attestation rate they have. But I think with SSV you'll have much lower risk, which is you always measure revenue by the amount of risk you took. And so I think that's a big part. And also it's much more decentralized. So if you have any concerns about, moving from service to service or owning your own keys or any of those things, SSV is a good solution. I think the longer term, the more we see MEV plays a major role in the revenue of validators, I think the more you'll want to use something like SSV, because any other services basically has its own internal way to do MEV, and you need to trust them that they share the revenue with you. With SSV, what we will try to do, and again, it's a kind of a more long-term thing, is to make MEV consumption as transparent as possible. And so you might be in a position where you know exactly what's happening. And I think the more MEV becomes dominant in the revenue or the rewards attached to a validator, the more people would want something like that. And so you can imagine that if you go to a closed service, that service can say, we share all of the MEV with you and everything, but you still need to trust them. With SSV, because of the way it works, it should be very transparent and open. I think so kind of in the long term, if you want transparency, you want to make sure that you receive what you could potentially make. I think the more transparent the network is, the better. But I think that like the major value is always the risk attached to the staking. The more risk you're carrying, both in terms of slashing risk or downtime risk or just centralization risk or any of the other types of risks you want to choose, I think people come to staking not because they want to make a quick buck. You won't be able to make a quick buck. Like, in our wildest dreams, you'll probably make 10 or 20% a year, which is crazy in of its own, but it's not something it's not a get rich quick scheme. And so I think people are very sensitive to the amount of risk they take in order to make that 10 or 5 or whatever the amount of rewards per year they'll make. And so I think that's the major value for SSV. And so, yeah, I mean, hope I got the
There's one more point I want to add to that, and that's from an operator's perspective, why not? I mean, if you're an operator, it's not like a zero-sum game. So it's not as if you're running SSV and then you're not running any other infra in-house. So a lot of operators can diversify their infrastructure and then run their own setup, their own service, and run SSV in parallel and be a part of the network and get potentially more ETH via the SSV network, more ETH staked, and gradually in the future potentially transition their own infrastructure to completely rely on SSV, which is what we intend to do at block staking. So in the initial phases, we're going to have both services live. It's going to be live in the future as well, but we will encourage our users to rely on a better infrastructure, a better setup, and gradually transition to SSV. So why not?
I think there's another point to make, which is any future staking service, again, whatever flavor you choose to, whatever flavor of staking service you wanna dream or implement, there's always that big cost of building your own infrastructure today. And with SSV, I think that you can dramatically reduce the amount of cost it will take you in order to spin up a staking service. It's kind of like, today it's very easy to spin up a DeFi service. than it was 3 years ago, just because people developed and did stuff, and you have a lot of building blocks already made. And I think the same thing will go with SSV. Part of the reason I'm very optimistic is because I think people will build on top of SSV. And so acting as an infrastructure, and if you're doing it well, I think will attract people to use it, not just because it's a superior technology to what you have today, but also because it's very easy, or will be very easy to use. If you have the proper documentation, you have everything is open source, you can, in a few minutes stake and so on. Those factors are pretty significant when we're talking about, the next years or next 2 years or next 5 years of staking services, which will go online and try to bring users. And so I think that's another major factor outside of the kind of, let's say, the technical benefits of using SSV.
It's a great answer. All right, guys, right before we move on, any final questions, thoughts, or anything you want to add regarding the DAO or the staking possibilities, Alon? Anything we might have overlooked?
Nope.
Okay, cool. Let's move on. So the second part is specifically about the token upgrade. Now, first and foremost, the question that kept on coming up is, why are you doing it? So can you explain why go through this whole process?
Yes. So as the name suggests, it's an upgrade. So it's literally new contracts and some kind of a migration scheme to get those new tokens. There's a few reasons. One is the kind of the technical reason. We wanted to update our contracts. The original CDT contracts were written in early 2017. And of course, they are you cannot change them, you cannot upgrade them. And so I think it's a good time to do so after 4 years, even more so. I think it's important. A lot of the ERC20 and other standards came a long way since then. So I think that's one part. Of course, you always have the name, right? You want to have the correct name for the correct product. And so SSV, changing the symbol for the token is pretty cool as well. And the third part is that the token and the ability to mint new tokens under the control of the DAO doesn't exist in the CDT smart contract. And so all of those reasons led us to make the upgrade. Also, we wanted to reduce the decimal points, the decimal precision for the not the decimal precision, the amount of circulating tokens, which will change the decimal precision needed to represent one token against Ethereum or whatever. And so all of those reasons are really what drove us to make a new contract. And it's an upgrade, which means basically that anyone who's holding CDT converts on-chain whenever they want to SSV. There's a fixed conversion rate, 1 to 100. So for every 100 CDT, you'll get 1 SSV, and that's for everyone. It doesn't change with time or anything. It's a fixed ratio. And so we'll also be moving from 1 billion circulating supply to 10 million. And so those are kind of the main points. In terms of when it will happen, so we've uploaded the proposal to the forum, I guess 2 or 3 weeks ago, and hopefully in the next 1 or 2 weeks we'll get the proposal on the snapshot page in order to actually vote, and the voting is done with CDT. And so CDT holders vote to upgrade to SSV token, and if that passes, then SSV tokens will be we'll deploy the SSV token with the conversion contract, and then anyone can, from that moment on, convert to SSV. Yeah.
A lot of our US guys and US community members asked where we're planning on listing the SSV token.
I mean, that's always a subject people want to ask. We try to give the power to the DAO to decide. So if the DAO decides to do something with some DEXs or anything, it's up to the DAO. And so, yeah, I mean, probably, we'll probably do the usual stuff like Uniswap and stuff like that. But it's really up to the DAO. The DAO needs to decide it wants to do that. Of course, anyone can, put liquidity into Uniswap. It doesn't really, you're not restricted by the DAO or blocks. But if the DAO wants to do something bigger, like provide liquidity or anything, that's the DAO's decision and not blocks' decision. I think it's a very important change of thought. Blocks is taking part in the network, and of course, we're leading the development and everything. But in a lot of cases, the DAO needs to decide about stuff, and that's what you want, right? I mean, that's the path to decentralization. You want other people to decide. You want it to be a community-driven decision, and so once we'll have the SSV tokens with the snapshot page. Basically, anyone can suggest and open up a discussion and say, look, I think it's important to provide liquidity to Uniswap or whatever. And if people support it, then it will happen.
Great answer. I have a pretty interesting question. So this question, if I'm not mistaken, Greg even asked it. It's about the centralized exchanges. So is there any implication for centralized exchanges like Binance or Gate.io that probably hold a lot of CDT or in the future SSV regarding the decisions that the DAO makes?
I think it's a pretty straightforward answer. If you are worried that somebody will vote with your token, don't keep it up in centralized exchanges. Put it in to your own wallet. It's as easy as that. And again, it's not an SSV specific question. That's any governance or any token for that matter. I personally don't hold my tokens in centralized exchanges or any centralized custodianship services. So if you're worried about those kind of things, it's very easy to take care of that. Just hold your tokens in your own wallet.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'm going to start the question
itself. By the way, we have zero, effect on whichever centralized exchange holding the tokens in terms of not letting them or letting them vote and participate in DAO decisions. Usually, that doesn't happen. I don't see Binance actually intervening with projects and putting their weight on different DAOs in the industry.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We have another question. Asking regarding the distribution of SSV tokens. So assuming the DAO is going to be holding an X amount of tokens, we're going to get into that later, X amount of tokens, and the DAO will be distributing that X amount of tokens between the operators and validators. Can you describe or at least predict how much of it will be distributed and how you will be doing it?
So maybe we need to correct the question before we start answering. So the DAO itself doesn't divide or do anything between the validators and the operators. What will happen is you'll have dedicated smart contracts which will do all of the fee payment between the user and the operator. And so the user will deposit SSV tokens, and those tokens will automatically and continuously be assigned to the operators that you use. And so, and of course, if you stop using it, it will stop be transferred to the operators and so on. It's out of the scope of the DAO. The DAO doesn't intervene in that. What the DAO would be able to do is, for example, there is a network fee for any validator you spin up. And we did that specifically for, if somebody wants to use the network in a private matter. So for example, let's say you're running your own operators and you don't care about getting verified or anything. You just want to run operators for your own staking service. Of course, you'll set the fee as an operator. You'll set the fee to zero. You'll still have to pay something to the network because of course you're using the network, and so that's why you have the network fee. But other than that, other than deciding how much the network fee is, the DAO itself doesn't distribute anything. Again, specifically for validators and operators, if the DAO wants to specifically do something, for example, make an airdrop or buy NFTs or whatever the DAO wants, it can do it specifically for a specific cause, and that needs to go through a proposal. Anything other than that, let's say the product related or the network related should be automated within smart contracts.
Mm-hmm. Great. Do you guys have any more questions before I continue with mine? All right, I guess I will continue. This is sort of an opinion, personal question for Alon and Adam. How much money do you guys think the DAO needs to be managing for it to be self-sufficient and autonomous?
That's a difficult question. I think that the DAO needs to make sure it has enough resources to continue developing SSV as long as Ethereum exists. And again, that's a very wide definition, but I think that if what we think with SSV will happen, which is a lot of people will use it as infrastructure for staking, and staking will be literally the ground on which Ethereum exists, then you have to have enough resources to make sure that you can develop and continue developing SSV as part of that ecosystem. Now, you could bring further grants from Ethereum. You could do a token sale. You can do a bunch of things, but I think it's very important for the DAO to have resources to continue developing SSV. And also the DAO needs to be independent. And so, for example, now, of course, Blocks is financing a lot of or putting in the resources to develop SSV, but that's not something ideally you want to continue forever, right? You don't want to be dependent on Blocks. You want to be, again, if this is to be a decentralized network, you cannot be dependent on a single entity. The DAO needs to have its own resources and hopefully its own contributors that are decentralized enough to continue the development of SSV regardless of what's happening with any specific entity or any specific company or any specific person. And so I think that's not a precise answer, but it's, I think, the vision I would hope the DAO will become.
I think the answer is more. So it's always a function of, the more money and resources you have, the better your ability to move fast, to give grants, to help different teams develop new technologies on top of SSV. So again, it's a very arbitrary question, but generally the answer is more.
Mm-hmm. There's a small question follow-up to this. Would you guys care to share a bit about how you're expecting or planning on driving more funds and people into the DAO?
Yeah, I mean, we've hinted it in the last blog post we did. SSV will have a partner program where we try to bring strategic partners into the DAO in the form of token sale. Once we finalize things, we'll propose it to the DAO and we'll see if the DAO approves or not. We haven't kind of released too much information because we want to make sure that once we do, it's actually, finalized and so on. But yeah, I think that's a pretty significant part of bringing new partners in and making sure that the DAO has resources. I think that tokens are very, very powerful in creating communities. And, if you use it right, I think that you can create a really solid bedrock on which, the DAO can continue working. And so hopefully we can make the proposal in the next few weeks.
Great answers. We're moving on to the next section. And this is a little bit of something we kept a little hidden from you guys. And we're very, very excited to announce it right now. I'll let you guys, Adam and Alon, take it away, but we're here to officially unveil the Incentivized Testnet for the SSV network. So Adam, if you care to describe what this is all about before we ask all the questions about it, take it away.
All right, so this is something that we've been working on for the past, I think, months, maybe even more. It's a pretty big program. It's the biggest one we've done so far in Blocks. And the idea of it is to essentially grant or reward participants in the testnet with SSV tokens. So whoever joins the network as a validator or as an operator will have the chance to generate SSV rewards. There are a few rules or essentially ways in which you can generate the rewards, and we actually published a blog post in our Twitter that you're very much encouraged to go and check out and learn more about the testnet. The idea behind it is to grow the network as much as we can. So basically, when you create a protocol, an open source, decentralized Ethereum staking infrastructure like SSV, what you want to do before you launch it to mainnet is to have as many operators, as many validators as possible, operating the network, engaging with it, so you'll be able to test any aspect of it you can imagine. We want all the bad stuff to happen now, so nothing bad will happen come mainnet. That's a given. And another aspect to it is Alon mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, the SSV tokenomics. So for us, the incentivized testnet is sort of a way to mimic the future tokenomics in the way that they will be rolled out on mainnet. So on mainnet, as Alon mentioned, you'll be able to pay fees to different operators for helping you manage your stake when you become a validator. The same thing will happen on the incentivized testnet. It won't be via smart contracts and as automated and seamless as it will be on mainnet, but it will be sort of a representation of the way it will look like when we actually launch the product. So the basics of it is we're going to reward testnet participants with around 32,000 SSV, which is quite significant over the course of the next few months. So until the end of the year, we'll see how the testnet goes and how big it will get and adjust the rewards accordingly. So if we'll see a huge response, a lot of people coming in, we might increase rewards or prolong the actual testnet to next year as well. But yeah, that's the framework of it. We're pretty excited, and we want to get as many people as possible participating, and for you guys to generate SSV rewards for your efforts. Because if you provide value to the network and join us in the early stages of our development, it's definitely beneficial for us, definitely beneficial for the network, and we want to be beneficial for you guys as well. So that's the framework of it.
Thanks for the intro. Talking about how beneficial, it'll be great if you could describe how much you guys are expecting the top operators, the top validators to be making, how that's structured, and how is that structured exactly?
Right. So we don't have like an exact number we can reveal right now because we don't have any idea how many operators and validators will be participating in the network next month. So the actual testnet is going to begin in October, so people have enough time to set up as operators or validators and so on and so forth. We don't have actual numbers, but basically the way it's going to work is we're going to airdrop every week until the end of the year. And the actual amount kind of depends on, again, the amount of operators and validators in the network. So the rewards themselves are going to be divided or allocated between validators and operator in this way. So 50% of the 32,000 ETH is going to be allocated to validators in the network. And then the remaining half will be divided between 25% between all of the operators, and then an additional 25% that will be reserved for verified operators only. And we can get to this, but essentially becoming a verified operator is something that Alon mentioned earlier in the AMA. It's also mentioned in the blog post, but right now there is a way of becoming a verified operator in a certain point in time, probably coming October, so right before we launched the incentivized testnet. That window of becoming a verified operator will be shut, will be closed, and becoming a verified operator will be done only by DAO vote under framework that is designed and set by the DAO. So again, there are a lot of caveats to actually calculating the amount of SSV you can generate. We'll see coming the official kickoff of the Incentivized Testnet, and we'll definitely send the community a few frameworks of how to calculate whatever it is you can generate from the program.
All right.
I just wanted to add that the 32,000 SSV comes from blocks. It's not we're not minting any new tokens, or it's not coming out of pocket of the DAO. It's something we felt we really needed to do because I think it will give a good boost to testnet and will allow us to really test out and stress test the testnet in a much greater way than we're doing today. So there's a lot of technical reasoning behind incentivizing testnets, and so doing that right, I think, can really boost both just stress testing the nodes and stress testing the network, but also just creating exposure to people to use SSV. And I think the testnet is great for that.
You've mentioned before that by the mainnet release, you would like to have anywhere between 25 to 30 operators would be a good estimate. What would be considered a good number for the testnet period in terms of number of validators who are participating? What would be considered a success?
I mean, it depends on which time frame inside the testnet, but we need thousands and thousands and thousands. You want to stress test the network. You want to make sure it works well, and so we need thousands and thousands of people. Now, of course, we can take 500,000 Guerli tokens and do all of it ourselves, but it misses the point. You want to have a lot of people using it, a lot of people with different experiences. You want to create that kind of feedback loop where people tell you something doesn't work and you have the ability to fix it. You want to have that built in. You don't want to develop in vacuum or without other people using it. And so I think that's a major reason why we wanted to do the incentivized testnet. You want to have people try to break what you're building.
There is something I want to add, which is anyone is able to go and visit our Explorer. So we have an Explorer that shows you the status of the network, in which you can see the amount of validators and operators that are running right now in the testnet. So I'm looking at live numbers. We have around 215 validators and 36 operators, of which I think around 20 plus are verified operators. So again, it's open and anyone is able to visit the Explorer and see what's going on with the network. A second thing is just to add to what Alon said, we also want to test out different compositions of operators in the network. So if the entire flow of ETH will go to 4 or 5 operators in the network, we will not be able to test a lot of operators and the different functions and combinations of operators in the test. So what we want to do is encourage people to actually set up the operators with different combinations of operators. Set up their validators with different combinations of operators, not just use the 4 biggest operators or whatever comes up first in the selection list when you set up your validator. So this is also an important point for us.
One of our community members is asking, is there a cap or limit on the number of validators that I can set up on the testnet?
Not like strictly, but if we'll see abuse, we'll simply not, we'll not just airdrop you. So, as long as it's, normal and you want to spin up a few, that's fine. If we'll see abuse where people, create 1,000 just to have airdrops, it's pretty easy to identify, and we'll simply eliminate them from the airdrop or the incentivized testnet program. And so it's you can try to do that, but we'll probably it will be fairly easy to see that, and you won't get anything.
Let's talk a bit about how to generate rewards when you're a validator. So basically, there are two things that you should definitely keep in mind. One is you need to keep a certain performance. So when you choose operators, you need to make sure these are good operators that have good performance over time. Because if your performance as a validator in the network goes below a certain KPI, then you won't be eligible to receive your airdrop. It will be the same in mainnet. So if you choose, bad operators, they will generate less rewards for you. So we want to keep, this mindset when we mimic the future token model. A second aspect is using operators which are not heavily used in the network. So if you use operators which are let's say the biggest operators in the network, there will be a sort of a reverse correlation between your ability to generate actual SSV rewards. So if you use smaller operators with good performance, those users of smaller operators will be able to generate more rewards, as opposed to sort of the more concentrated operators which manage, the larger portion of validators in the network. So performance and diversity, these are the two things, people need to keep in mind. So if you just, automatically set up your validators, you can get crossed off if you try to abuse the system, and B, it might jeopardize your ability to actually generate performance and diversity and maximize your reward return from the Incentivized Testnet program.
Yeah.
That actually touches on the next question, which is how can you guys give people who are not verified operators or small scale operations who want to become big the opportunity to promote themselves or generate traction in the SSV network?
I think part of what we try to do is create a path for people to become verified operators. Now, it's not easy to become a verified operator for obvious reasons. But I think that if people ask the question you just asked, then we're doing something right, because that's exactly the question you should be asking yourself on mainnet. If I'm spinning up an SSV node and I want to give service to others, how do I make sure people know who I am? How qualified am I to do so, and so on and so forth. And so that's exactly the discussion we need to have on the testnet and then carry over to mainnet. In the next few weeks, we'll release a path to become verified through the DAO, through a proposal to the DAO, and so on and so forth. And so people can attempt to do so. And it's not easy, but if you'll make it, then of course more people will select you as an operator. So it's a very good question, and it's a core question in I think that we need to start talking within the community.
But by the way, it's hard in any context. So if you're a new operator and you just open, a business, and you want to attract stakers, it's hard to do in SSV, and it's hard to do in any context, like outside of SSV. I think one of the main advantages here is that you are able to be an early adopter in something that is very likely to be, the future infrastructure for Ethereum staking. And if you are an early adopter in any network, you could take, for example, going back to Chainlink. So there are companies that are today very successful because they were not the biggest or the strongest or had the best infrastructure in the blockchain ecosystem, but they started early on in the Chainlink and sort of grew with the network. So we want to encourage a lot of operators to also join the SSV network in an early stage, make a name for themselves during the incentivized testnet phase, and then just leverage that momentum into mainnet. And I think there are we'll introduce more ways to sort of make a name for yourself and be more dominant in the network moving forward. Also, obviously, there is pricing and other elements or levers you can pull and control. But I think, SSV, the earlier you get started, the better.
Great. I've been asking all the questions, so I'm going to stop for a second and see if there's any other questions coming in, either from the community or from Greg and Taiga.
So I have a few questions. First, as a user that's a non-operator, how best can I support the development of this? Currently, I'm running an SSV validator, but should I spin up 10 of them, or is that one sufficient?
I think that definitely if you want to spin more, that's good. And also, I think the feedback loop is important. If you see something doesn't work, or you want to dig into the technical sides and then kind of try others to figure out what's not working with them, I think that's a huge support to the effort. We are basically bug hunting the past weeks, and we'll continue to do so in the next few months. And so the more people have eyeballs on their validators and can spot if something doesn't work, bigger are the chances we can catch big bugs and big issues and solve them. And so I think that's one part. And the second part is always exposure and just education. I think that more people should be aware of what we're doing in the different staking communities out there. I think that SSV could be definitely used by a lot of them. Rocket Pool and all of the big communities out there. And so just spreading the word, I think it's important. I think that the more people see and hear that there's an active testnet and they can participate, I think the better it is.
So basically just run our validators, and if we see them not working correctly, just notify you guys.
And of course, if you have any software development background, we can always use more working hands.
All right. Cool. And so you mentioned basically choosing only verified operators. Is there any value to you guys in picking like the fourth one to be just some random one that might be a little less reliable?
No, I mean, you can choose unverified operators. You can spin your own and kind of, you and your friends and select one another. I think that for the testnet, it's a good thing because then you have more people testing it out. But I think ultimately you'll see more and more people choosing verified operators as their real mainnet operators. It doesn't mean that other operators cannot contribute to the network. I think they can, and I think that the DAO doesn't have monopoly on who is verified and who is not. If somebody comes and says, you know what, I have a different way of verifying operators, and if he can convince other people to use his own registry, then people will do that. I mean, there's a bunch of ideas floating around. For example, there's a cool idea from dApp nodes to have a hybrid configuration where you'll have 2 dApp nodes and 2 verified operators on the same validator, and so you can reduce the costs, make it more distributed and decentralized. And so again, it's infrastructure. I'm hoping that a lot of people will choose a lot of different configurations to use it, and then you'll see just a variety of different ways to configure and use SSV. And so yeah, I mean,
just want to emphasize one more point, and that's that we're not building SSV and the entire verified operator framework is not meant to help companies, the bigger staking companies in the ecosystem to become even bigger using SSV. It's a completely open network. Anyone can join. Anyone can be successful, in an early stage network. And essentially, there are different ways you can definitely think of, to differentiate yourself. For example, what we imagine will happen in the future is that people would like to diversify their operators between different clients, different companies, different geolocations. So let's say if you scan the network and you realize that, most of the operator services using Prism and Lighthouse. So you can go to yourself and say, hey, I'm a small shop, but I want to sort of create a name for myself and diversify a bit. So let's run a different client. So let's run a Tico client, and then maybe people will choose me if they need that, client diversification. So I'll be unique in that way, or create some uniqueness around being a hardware operator and not running your stack using a cloud. So there are different ways to approach it, and it's definitely not meant only for the big, teams in the ecosystem to succeed and create successful services.
Any more questions, Greg?
That's all I have at the moment. Thanks.
Cool. I do have a few more questions before we move on to the open-ended section where it's sort of free-for-all questions coming in from all different places. This one is pretty interesting. So there's someone who watched Alon on stage. For those of you who haven't seen, Alon was on a call with the ETH staker community a couple of days ago. The entire topic of the conversation was diversification. So I have a question coming in from a user asking, let's say I want to use, hypothetically, in SSV, I want to use a single operator without having to diversify between different operators, but still be able to use the benefits that SSV brings to the table. How would that look like?
Well, it's not really possible. I mean, it is possible, but then it's a centralized service, so it's kind of like going to any other centralized service. SSV, in order to be fault tolerant, needs 3 F+1 operators. So if F equals 1, then it's 4 operators. If F equals 2, that's 7 operators, and so on. That's where you get the fault tolerance. I won't get into why it's 3 F+1, but it is. And so selecting anything under that, you simply not using SSV to its full capacity, and so it's kind of like building a DeFi protocol where you need to authorize all transactions, and so it is built on Ethereum, but it's very centralized. So it's kind of like the same thing here.
Mm-hmm. Great. All right, last question for this section coming in from our YouTube live stream is, what are your general strategy to grow people on top of the incentivized testnet? So obviously, you spoke about the incentivized testnet. How are you planning to grow or help the validators and operators grow from within the network?
I think the incentivized testnet is a big step forward. I think that spreading the word and just being solid in a solid community is pretty important. I think that making SSV more approachable via the good documentation and explanation, kind of tutorials and stuff like that's a big thing as well. And also reaching out potential users of SSV. I think all of those things combined hopefully will get us more people to use the testnet and then the mainnet.
Right, great answer. Okay, thank you guys. Now, for those of you watching, follow the unicorn. All the information is on the social media. Some of you might have spotted or noticed something a little off during the call. There was a hidden message, so good luck with that. Now open Q&A. If there are any topics, any questions, I have plenty more. We could be going on for hours, but if you guys have any open-ended questions for Alon, Adam, or any of our ambassadors, this is the time. I have a personal question actually that came up during the call. Do you guys plan on introducing any delegated DAO ideas, delegated structures, sub DAOs, any sort of ramping up of the DAO for the average Joe validator for the network?
Yeah, probably. No concrete plans as of now, but I think delegated voting is something which could be interesting. Right.
Any other questions, Greg, Taiga, anything at all?
So I don't have another question, but just as a comment, one thing that I think is special about SSV is sort of the vision that you guys have in it becoming like the infrastructure behind many different staking providers. And one thing I want to emphasize to people watching this, or to emphasize, is for people that will go out and be kind of like spread the word on this, is that there's so much value in that aspect of it, and looking at it apart from just being a simple extension of blocks and as another staking provider. It seems like the vision you guys have to sort of create this infrastructure and allow like different layers to be built on top of it in a decentralized manner, whether that's other staking providers building on top of it or using MEV or whatever. It's a very powerful idea, and I feel like there's not enough emphasis on that within the the larger staking community that's exposed to this idea. The current state of staking right now is like, what's the monthly price and what's the effectiveness and whatever. But I think that's really, really great, and I that's what I love about SSV, I guess.
I couldn't agree more. I think that agree with a part that not a lot of people talk about it. I think that it's partly our fault because we haven't let's say promoted it too much. But I think that one of the things I'm always thinking about is, I don't know if anyone here was in the early days of Ethereum, but a lot of not maybe a lot, but Ethereum did a lot of work in examples like what you can do with smart contracts before anyone knew what smart contracts are. I don't know if you guys remember the big fight between Bitcoin and Ethereum, where one day Vitalik did a smart contract and said, I can write entire Bitcoin blockchain in 50 lines of code on Ethereum and so on. Those things promote adoption because then it gives people ideas and so on. So I would definitely want to see, both from our end but also from the community, like what you could think can be built on top of it. Like if build a proof of concept staking pool on SSV, build a proof of concept key generation protocol, whatever you choose to do. We would love to support and be behind it, but I think that there's a lot of work we can do in order to promote that. I think that will help people connect to the idea that SSV is an infrastructure layer, as much as it's an extension of a staking service.
Great. We have a lot of
just one more thing to mention. By the way, Greg, I completely agree with your comments earlier on. I think SSV is sort of a great shot for the Ethereum ecosystem to actually make staking one of the more dominant DeFi Legos. So to place staking, Ethereum staking inside different dApps in the network, inside DeFi applications, it's really hard to do. It's practically impossible to do with a lot of the services that exist today because they have a lot of centralized elements. But once you create this infrastructure, anyone can build, like Alon mentioned, applications which have SSV running underneath them, then you can actually take the entire concept of Ethereum staking and make it seamless inside DeFi, which is, everybody know how big and important that is. So I'm really excited about the application you can build on top of the network, and I think it will be an important part of the conversation moving forward as well.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see where this goes. I can't wait to see what's developed on top of it.
Awesome.
I have a question, if you don't mind. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. A question I do have is how. So we've talked about how people can build on top of SSV, right? And how it will work as a backend engine for many of the DeFi Legos. So a question I have is, does Blocks, the service that we know today, plan on leveraging SSV, or what does a transition from the current standard service that we all know look like to SSV? Because we all know that the service it's very easy to use. What will a transition look like if people want to move to SSV and keep that ease of use?
Yeah, we will do that as natively as we can. I think that moving from a non-custodial staking service like Blocks to a non-custodial decentralized network like SSV just makes sense. I know I personally will do that, and we'll enable that through Blocks Live to the users. It's important to keep in mind that at the end of the day, it's the user's decision. We don't hold the keys. We can't force anyone to do that. But we'll the closer we get to mainnet, we'll enable that kind of transition to users, and so it could be pretty cool to see.
All right, guys, we're a bit over the time. I hope it's okay with that everyone staying.
One last thing, it's also important to mention that block staking is definitely something we're continuing to develop and work on. It's definitely a core product in the company. And there are a lot of demands, for example, for seedless staking and everything. These are things that we are working on. It's a bit off topic for this AMA, but block staking is alive and well.
All right, guys, I'm sorry for keeping on jumping into your discussions. So we're a bit overboard. Just to wrap things up, it's a question that came up on all social media throughout this entire conversation. I know it's a little early and there's a lot of work left, but Alon, is there an ETA for this?
For what? For mainnet?
For mainnet, yeah.
No.
Great answer. All right, guys. Thank you all for joining. I'm sorry that we have to cut this after almost an hour and a half online, but it's been great. We will host another AMA. We'll make sure to collect all the questions on time. So if you guys have anything else you didn't have the chance to ask or anything else you want to ask, we'll all be available on Discord until the next AMA.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.